Hello and welcome to the season premiere for season 22 of Charles' Weekly Parti. I'm Charles, your host. I'm back and I'm ready to talk about some architecture and some tech. But before we can do that, as always, let's roll the intro. Alright, so I announced last December that I'd be taking a little bit of a break to help sort of relax, get myself back on track, and figure out what was going to happen for season 22, as well as preparing some background changes. What I didn't necessarily say is that the break served a second purpose, to help determine the future and my energy for the podcast. Because by the end of the season, I had used basically all of the vacation, or air quotes vacation, that I had available. And in doing so, well, let's just say I got to a point where by the time I was sort of burnt out, I wasn't able to take a pause. But what I realized over the break was I was sort of losing touch with the fun of getting to look into architecture and technology every week. And as listeners, that's the fun that you get from listening. You get to hear some of the latest and greatest in technology, and you get to hear about interesting pieces of architecture that you might otherwise not have known existed. And for me, having the opportunity to look into them so I could talk about them, well, that was something I was missing. Now, I had promised that there was going to be a trailer, or I don't know if I promised or not, but I said I'd be releasing a trailer. I recorded the trailer and then proceeded to have an extraordinarily busy week, which didn't enable me to actually edit and release it. So last week I did actually record the trailer, I just didn't get around to the other important components. But here we are. So what I'm going to do is the stuff that would have gone into the trailer, I'm going to mention right here and right now, and subsequently release as a trailer for the season 22. So if you've been around from last season, you know it's about architecture and technology. However, as a gentle refresher, a parti is the simplest expression of the idea of a building. In this sense, my weekly parti is the simple abstract of what I'm thinking. Sure, there's a lot that goes on in my head, but each week I select a piece of architecture and technology bits that really catch my eye and that are really driving me. And these make up my weekly parti. Throughout the season, there will be weeks where maybe I don't think about as much on the architecture side, and there will be weeks I don't think about as much on the technology side. That happens, and those in the past were referred to as archisodes and techisodes. This season, it's going to be a little bit different. Every episode will be an episode, because every episode represents my parti for the week. Sometimes I need to reserve all of my excitement for one thing or another. And as you could probably guess, it burns me out to try, and when I'm all excited about one thing in the technology realm, to try and talk about architecture. It doesn't work out for you, and it doesn't work out for me. So this season, I'm happy to announce that everything will be done with accord of the feedback that I received from Season 21. I will also be aiming that most episodes will take between 30 minutes to a half an hour. And I'm hoping, because I know different episodes have different feature lengths, and the more excited I am about something, the more I talk about it, and the longer the episode goes. The other thing from last season that I'm going to definitely be taking into consideration and expanding on is the couple of episodes where I brought Michael on. So these episodes were guest episodes, but personally they were some of my favorite to record. And listener feedback was absolutely phenomenal as well. So this season, I'm happy to announce that I will be bringing on more guests for more episodes. So hopefully Michael will be joining us again this season, but he's not the only one. Also on the opening thoughts docket, I had anticipated getting new microphones to be able to better record my voice and to reduce the amount of echo that I'm stuck with, being in an echo chamber of which I cannot modify the walls. Although this, if you've listened through all of Season 21, is not the worst space that I've ever recorded in. So, unfortunately, and I'll get to it a little bit later, the budget for the podcast did not permit the purchasing of new equipment. So right now, I'm going to work with what I have. So fingers crossed, sometime mid-season, we'll be able to get some equipment upgrades in place. But until then, I hope you can enjoy the present quality, which is, there's probably a little bit of reverb, as I can hear in the room right now, but to some degree I think it adds character. Now, on to the sort of fun stuff. Being in the season of winter, I wanted to talk about a piece of architecture that was more winter related. And I stumbled across something called the Birch Hill Ski Building. So the Birch Hill Ski Building is designed by Bettesworth North, and it's located in Fairbanks, Alaska. To be clear, this is an area where temperatures drop to 65 degrees Fahrenheit, or negative 65 degrees Fahrenheit, and even colder. So it's not everyone's favorite place. I know I've been stuck with some cold weather, but nowhere near that low. But for the people who really are into skiing, they don't mind it. I guess they just bundle up pretty darn well. This 11,175 square foot building is, I don't know how best to put it, but it has a really good arrangement of colors and building elements. And I don't know how best to put it besides the fact that the moment I saw a picture of this building, I knew I had to talk about it. Which, to be clear, was a little bit more challenging than expected because the normal amount of information I aim for, I wasn't able to really get. So here we are. What I was able to get was that this building was designed with two sort of pods in mind. So pod 1 features the entryway, an elevator and a stairway, and waxing areas, changing areas, and bathrooms. Pod 2 features a warming shelter and a gathering area. For Pod 1, the design is a little bit more industrial with galvanized metal siding and a flat roof. Pod 2, on the other hand, is built to seem significantly warmer, featuring cedar siding and a curved roof. The two pods are connected by a bridge which spans directly over the ski trail. So what adds to that element of warming is the fact that the wood structure is exposed in the gathering area and at the bridge. The exterior is also a nice red, which really makes it stand out from snow in the wintertime and the grass in the summertime, or in the bits of summer that Fairbanks, Alaska gets. But to be clear, I have in front of me a picture with green grass outside that's not snow covered. So it is possible. Also, the bridge, or at least the form of the bridge, extends all the way to the other end of the building, giving it a very unique facade. So you have the industrial metal cladding with a cutout in between with the red cedar exterior and some exposed wood. My thoughts on this are actually a little bit different. When I said it stood out to me, I was not kidding. The moment I saw it, I wanted to learn about it, explore it, all that fun stuff. Now, to take everything into consideration is a little bit more of a challenge, considering that I wasn't able to get everything. But the things that sort of struck me as being very specific and important to this particular building is that the bridge that spans over it. I think that adds an important element to the building to really help it focus on the skiing. Because I'm guessing when this was built, they wanted everything to be one footprint. Bridges aren't the cheapest things in the world to construct, especially not covered and enclosed ones. To further take things into consideration, you want different elements of the building to sort of remain separate. And I think having the two divided areas actually makes a lot of sense. First, you're not obstructing the ski trail. And second, your waxing areas, your changing areas, and your bathrooms are all locations where you do not want windows. However, places like gathering areas and the warming shelter, which is incredibly important when the temperature drops to negative 65 degrees, those, you like windows, natural light, all of that fun stuff. So realistically speaking, you have two different areas of focus in the building, known in the architecture community as programming, that need to have their own character. And they all need to be one building. So the bridge actually helps, pardon the pun, bridge the ideas together and bridge the two elements together. So another thing that really stood out to me about the building was the curved roof over the warming area and the gathering, or warming shelter in the gathering area. When I think about skiing, outdoor sledding, and snowboarding, I think about downhill. And what better way to represent hills than to have a curving and flowing roof? Because realistically speaking, that's what you're trying to do. You can't ski, or well, can, but it's not as much fun to ski uphill or ski just on flat land. Letting gravity do a lot of the work makes things a lot more fun, which is actually and you need the hills for snowboarding and sledding. So having the curving roof really helps sort of embrace that culture of having a flowing sport that relies on the ups and the downs. You have to go up to go back down, which is what every hill and mountain ends up doing. It also alludes to the flowing nature of the building, how you have one area or two areas that are separate footprints and they're bridged together. And the curves really help sort of give that feeling of flowing and flowing smoothly. Radio waves flow like that. Regular sea waves we think about in that same flowing way. But all of it comes down to flowing. And the way the roof goes and how it sort of tapers down as you go towards the industrial portion of the structure, that helps the people flow go from the area of darkness and privacy and, well, I'm sure it's well lit inside, but it's not very naturally lit. Going from that more industrial side to the more open side, from seclusion to exposure. List goes on. But to think that one of the most standout elements of the structure is also its most important is not terribly surprising. And in architecture, what's more fun than a pleasant surprise? And I think this building does just that. And there are a lot more secrets to it as well, which I can't find. I wasn't able to get my hands on floor plans, unfortunately. But it's still a building that would be very interesting to visit, and it certainly embodies that architecture atmosphere. And when I say that architecture atmosphere, if you were tuned in last season, I talked about it several times, how you can have a building without architecture. And architecture isn't always in the form of a building. Well, this building is both a building and architecture, as it takes into account everything about its site and its location and its function and its purpose to create a space for people to be able to aptly enjoy on their way to go skiing. Speaking of flowing, I think it's about time to flow to my next topic of the NVIDIA 3050 launch. So this past week, the NVIDIA 3050 graphics card launched, part of their 3000 series. And it was announced at CES 2022 and very predictably sold out within hours. Unfortunately, as I've mentioned in the past season, graphics cards are one of the most difficult components to get your hands on. And as much as I wish this wasn't the case, it certainly is. So if you're able to find one at MSRP, chances are a lot of other people are able to as well, and they will be finding them. So, unfortunately, as fast as they went out of stock, the 3050 cards are sadly already popping up on eBay with price tags starting at $600 going over $800. And I feel like now is a good time to mention that the MSRP of the card is starting at $249, which means that the cheapest that you could get this card is more than it should cost to buy. You can buy two for the cost of buying one on eBay like this. My thoughts on the matter haven't really changed a lot since last season. Right now, with the extreme shortage on the graphics cards and the silicon to produce them, there are many people who actually need the cards and are not able to get them. And I ran into this as a very personal pain point recently when the graphics card that I have had since I was in high school decided to make a grand exit. Yet another reason why everything is currently a little bit on the delayed side. So, of course, I would have liked to, since I have had to spend money to replace the card anyway, replace it with the ideal 3050 or 3060, or at that time, the 3050 had not yet been released. Now, of course, as one could presume, it was next to impossible to get the 3060, and the only place that I would have been able to get it at, I would have paid $785 for the $329 card. And I'm sorry, folks, but I'm not doing that. So my pain point right now is that they were sold within hours. Now, if they had been sold to people who wanted them and needed them, then yeah, that would have been great. I would not be sore at all. But that's not the case. My personal pain point is that they're already popping up on eBay from $600 to $800. And I will point out that there was a YouTube channel that did something called a verified gamers program, which basically meant that they got a stock of graphics cards and made them available only to verified gamers, people who were actually going to get the card and use it for its intended purpose. Not people who would be buying it to mine cryptocurrency, or at least not primarily, or just sell it for a higher resale value. But it is a free market, and this is the way things work out sometimes. And I have to respect your right to purchase a graphics card for a certain amount and then be able to charge double for it. Kudos to you. Do I want to pay double for it? No. And this is where the supply-demand fun starts happening. So when will this issue be fixed is a good question, and I think the best response to it is eventually. I started off last season, the very first episode, I talked about details with the graphics card shortage. And here we are, almost a year later. Actually, it's a couple months shy, or about a month shy, but close enough. and we're still in the same situation. And here's where I'm going to remind everyone that this is a three-pronged problem. The first prong is that because of everything going on and the increased need for silicon that runs everything, the ability to produce computer chips hasn't been able to be drastically increased, and that won't be able to be increased for a couple more years. So right now we're at the mercy of the plants that are able to produce chips, which are, to the best of my knowledge, working at about 100% capacity instead of working at 90 or 80% capacity as they normally would. So you have, on one token, the supply issue. The second issue is that you have cryptocurrency mining happening. The second issue has to do with cryptocurrency mining. However, this may or may not be coming to an end sometime this year. Over the past couple of weeks, Bitcoin has taken a very sharp drop, as has Ethereum. And Ethereum has pledged to eventually move over to a proof-of-stake method of mining, which would basically make graphics cards useless for mining Ethereum. And for those of you who do not know what mining is, it is using the processor in the graphics card, which is able to handle this type of calculation easily, and run the necessary cryptographic computations to keep the cryptocurrency running. And as that happens, each person who does that gets some cryptocurrency in return. Here's where the fun starts, right? NVIDIA created something called a hash limiter, which was supposed to try and reduce the amount of capability that a graphics card had to mine cryptocurrencies. Well, evidently, cryptocurrency miners are not having huge issues with that limiter in place because, as I mentioned, it was a software limiter, and they said it basically did nothing to stop them, or they were able to work around it one way or another. So, unfortunately, that one did not work out as well as anyone would have liked. And for the third prong, with a lot of people doing a lot of things from home, the demand for graphics cards has gone way up, and for good reason. As more games are released with with more demanding specifications, it goes without saying that a lot of people are going to need equipment upgrades to run this stuff. In order to remain at an affordable state, when I replaced my graphics card, I had to go with pretty much the exact same thing that was in there, except from EVGA instead of ASUS. As much as it pains me to admit it, the reality here is when this issue will be resolved, well, the prongs need to start being taken care of. And the problem is the third prong is the one that can't be taken care of until the first two prongs fall into place. So first thing that needs to happen is, well, the inevitable cryptocurrency mining boom, or to come to an end. It's happened in the past, it will happen again. Especially with the numbers dropping from, I remember the high of Bitcoin was sometime last season, almost $60,000. It is now down to 36. I don't know if it'll be going up or if it'll be going down tomorrow. Nobody really knows that. But if it keeps going down, that might be a little bit of a help. Now, the other thing that needs to happen is Ethereum needs to finally transition from their proof of work to proof of stake. They mentioned this last year, and I don't remember exactly when I talked about it, but whenever that change happens, it will basically make the use of graphics cards for mining Ethereum be moot. So once all of this starts happening, the people who have mining rigs and tons of the graphics cards will want to offload them. It happened previously, and it will happen again. When this happens, and if a lot of people do it at once, the price point will drop drastically, because whenever the boom happens, it floods the used market, and a lot of people suddenly have access to graphics cards. Whether or not you want ones that were used in a mining environment is a different question and a different matter, because it depends on how seriously the miner took thermals. If they were able to properly keep the cards cooled, they might be decent. The problem is, as silicon functions at higher temperatures, well, let's just say it eventually, higher temperatures don't do it any favors, and as a matter of fact, reduce its lifespan. So we will have to see how this goes, but my answer to all of this is eventually it will end. The other component I've mentioned, the three-pronged problem, is that I believe in 2024, Intel should have chip producing facilities go online in the United States. If this indeed happens, I know it's 2 years down the road from now, but once that happens, the chip making ability of the United States will be increased. And even if Intel doesn't make any graphics card or GPUs on their new equipment, well, let's just say if Intel were to take their supply off of the current primary chip manufacturers, that would free up a lot of room for a lot of other types of chips. And once all of these pieces start falling into place, there will be an increase in supply, and the high overcharging and the scalping that's currently going on will eventually be brought to an end. So my answer right now on graphics cards is that if you absolutely need to get one, if you can live without the latest and greatest, do it. I think the replacement that I got, I paid less than $30 for. It's also a very old graphics card, and by that I mean it's, I think, 12 years old. But it works. It's able to give me display output, and I'm able to play the couple of games that I have time for on it. So if you can live with that, do it. It's not that expensive. If you can't, well, if you can't try, you can get the latest that you want to without exceeding your price budget. If you need something to get by, even Best Buy has their cheap graphics cards, but they'll be able to at least give you some output to a display if your processor doesn't have integrated graphics support. I think I need to shift from talking about graphics cards to talking about the graphics of a car. And with that, I need to mention the BMW color-changing car, which, honest to goodness, is the coolest thing I have seen this year. So the BMW iX Flow, back to our flowing theme, is a electric car wrapped in an e-ink wrapper. So if you're not familiar with e-ink, it's the technology located inside of Kindle's and Barnes & Noble's original Nook readers. And I think there's one other reader. I'm not entirely sure what it was. But the cars are wrapped in it, and what it allows drivers to do is personalize. Every time you get behind the wheel of the car, you can change what your car looks like just a little bit. You can add patterns, all that fun stuff. But currently the wrap only supports black, white, and some shades of gray, which, if you've owned an e-reader, is not really any terrible surprise. So while part of the purpose is personalization, BMW pointed out, and I pointed out pretty quickly as well, that just being able to switch between black, white, and gray is actually pretty incredible. In the summertime, if your car's sitting in direct sunlight, or if you park two cars next to each other, same model, same manufacturer, same year, all that fun stuff. Basically the exact same car, except one's painted white, the other one's painted black. In the summertime, both cars will heat up, but the black car will heat up a lot more than the white car will. So in the summertime, white car, really nice. In the wintertime, though, you want the opposite effect. You want the black car to be able to absorb more of the heat energy, so when you get into your car, it's not freezing cold, or it's not as freezing cold. Well, what this technology allows you to do is sort of shift that. So in the summertime, you could park your car, press a button, make sure the car is white, and the car won't be as hot when you get back into it. The other thing is that in the wintertime, do the same function. I don't know exactly how the car controls this inside, but change it, make it a darker color so it absorbs more of the light, and you'll walk into a hopefully toastier car. I know on some winter days, having parked a black car in a sunny spot, I have gotten into it, and it's basically like walking inside sometimes. Just felt like taking my jacket right off. So at present, this car is only experimental to all of you who wanted to have one of the villainous changing cars. I don't remember what series it was, but I remember one old TV show that I watched. The escaping villains pressed a button and it flipped the license plate and turned the car from white to gray. So whether or not we'll see this car on production is a good question, and it's one that I don't have the answer to, nor does BMW, because it's currently in an experimental state, and there's no word on if or when, or I should say when or if, this will become a production car. Last but not least today, I want to talk about the AMD 6000 series processors. AMD will be releasing both a desktop and a laptop set of the processors. Right now, only the laptop or the mobile processors are being released. So they'll be using the Zen 3 Plus architecture, and they're built on a 6nm process. These mobile cores feature up to 8 processing cores with 16 threads, and they feature new and enhanced power management features, as well as some new deep sleep states. The 6000 series processors work on DDR5 memory, and the highest end processors are able to get up to a 5.0 gigahertz boost, which is absolutely incredible. There are 13 different CPUs, and the first laptops with them will be released in February. If you want one of the 6000 series processors for your desktop computer, you're going to have to wait a little bit. AMD has said that they are not going to release the 6000 series processors until DDR5 is ready for that, because the new processors use DDR5 instead of DDR4. Right now, since DDR5 is, honest to goodness, the latest and greatest, its prices are nowhere near inexpensive and reasonable. And it doesn't help if you're going to be selling processors if nobody can get the required memory to get the processors. And any person worth their salt is not going to be picking up the processor unless they reasonably believe they can get their hands on the memory. Here's where it gets fun. I mentioned that the first laptops are expected to be released in February, featuring these new processors. They have, I don't remember exactly how many, but quite a few notable companies lined up to be utilizing their products. And how this will go, I do not yet know. But HP, Asus, Microsoft Surface, Lenovo, and others are all companies that will be integrating these processors into their computers. And now I'm genuinely curious as to whether or not these are better than Intel's 12th generation processors, which were actually decent. I talked about those last season. I'm sure you can probably find the episode. Personally, I'm excited to see the latest and greatest in chips being brought out, especially after Apple went and really kicked everyone to the curb with their M1, M1 Pro, and M1 Max processors. How long Apple will be holding that lead, we have yet to find out, but until we see the benchmarks on these, that will remain a slight mystery. And the other component to truly knowing whether or not this will work is whenever Microsoft Windows becomes available to be installed in Mac OS. Or did I just say that? Whenever Windows is able to be run on a Mac without needing virtualization, which sort of hampers performance. But I think that'll do it for today. So I do hope you've enjoyed this episode and happy to be back recording them. In closing, I just think it's pretty cool that there's now a color-changing car, new line of processors, more GPUs that nobody can get their hands on, and, well, a beautiful, beautiful ski building. So, if you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. You can go to anchor.fm/weeklyparti, yes, the link changed, where you can listen to previous episodes of the podcast, including all of the ones from Season 21. You can interact with voice messages and support the podcast. If you're using Apple Podcasts, please leave a review. And if you want, you can see the action on YouTube. And eventually, there will be a really good new intro to be viewed on YouTube, and there are little quality of life improvements planned over the course of Season 22 to the YouTube release. With that, my party for the week is just keep innovating. Don't scalp graphics cards. If you get one at MSRP, either use it or sell it at MSRP to someone who actually will use it. And hope and pray that this will come to an end sooner rather than later. So these problems could be resolved this year. They might not be resolved for another couple years. We'll have to see. But no matter what, we will eventually get out of the darkness and into the light. I'm Charles. That's been my party for the week. Take care and roll the outro.